Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tool of the Week. This week we're going to cover Visual Studio Code. We're going to go over basically how to get started with it, what are the most commonly used and useful features, and how do you use them. That is what we'll cover in this tutorial. So what is Visual Studio Code? It's a code editor, not just a plain text editor and also not a full-fledged IDE. It is very fast to start and to use, but it also has some of the features that are traditionally only in full-fledged IDEs. Features such as code navigation, refactoring, building, and debugging. Let's quickly cover how you would install it. I don't even need to show you. Just Google VS Code, go to the website, download the installer for your platform, launch it, and follow the instructions. It's straightforward. How do you change settings? So once you got it up and running, one thing that you'll want to do is mess with the settings. In particular, I like to change two settings. So go to File, Preferences, Settings, and then you can search for settings up here. I like to change the start page, so search for the start page setting, and here it is. Controls which editor is shown at startup. I like to change it to none. By default, it's the welcome page. I just find it annoying, so I change it to none. Also, search for the toggle minimap setting or just minimap. Yeah, and then it's this setting over here controls whether the minimap is shown. I like to check it off. By default, it's checked on. I find the minimap to be annoying. It doesn't really provide any usefulness. So how do you change keyboard shortcuts? Because that's also something that you're going to be doing often. Go to File, Preferences, Keyboard Shortcuts, and you can search for keyboard shortcuts as well. I like to search for the Show All Commands shortcut, and I changed it to Control-Shift-A. By default, it's Control-Shift-P. Now, this is a good time to go over commands. Everything that you do, well, almost everything that you do in Visual Studio Code is a command that you execute. And there's different ways to get to that command. One way is to basically use this show all command thing. That pops up a little search box. You search for the command and then you select it with the arrow keys and you press enter to execute it. You can also oftentimes use little context shortcuts by right clicking or looking at the menu over here, or by using the assign keyboard shortcut for the command. So go ahead and change that keyboard shortcut. And I also like to change the go-to symbol in File. By default, I forget what it is, but it's pretty long, and I like the Alt plus backslash because I'm used to that from other programs. So make those changes. Now, all the language services such as syntax highlighting, code navigation, refactoring, building, debugging, etc., all those services are provided by extensions for that language. So to install an extension, just click this extensions button on the sidebar, and then by default you'll be shown the most popular extensions over here. I like to install the Python and the C++ because those are the languages that I work with the most. But you can search for your own language up here. And let's say that I wanted to install the ESLint extension. I just click on it and then click install, but I don't want that extension, so I'm not going to do that. Okay. So how do you open a file? I like to just take the file and drag it. You can also do file open, obviously, and you can also open it via your terminal. So if I close this and I launch a terminal, I'm on Windows, so I'm just going to use command prompt. Change to the desktop directory. I can just do code and then main.py, and that opens it as well. Alright, so once you got your file open, here are some useful things that you can do to it, and things that you'll often do when you're programming. So if you put your cursor over a word, so for example, let's put my cursor over the score word, you'll see all the, or let's say on the on key down word, you'll see all the usages of that word in your file. They're shown in two places. On the scroll bar, you see it over here as little white marks, and over here. And you also see them highlighted on your page. So you see it highlighted over here. And if I scroll down to the second usage, which my scroll bar says is over here, you see that it's also highlighted on the page. So the word that your cursor is under is highlighted on the page, and it's also highlighted on the scroll bar. Another thing is, instead of just selecting a word by just putting your cursor over it, if for example you want like not just the whole word, but let's say I just want these three characters, the key, I can just select them manually. And as you can see, it does the same exact thing. This is really useful for two things. One, when you want to quickly see how a word or a phrase is used in your file, like where in general it's used in your file. So if I select this key phrase, I can see that it's used quite a bit, and I can see where it's used in my file. And then I can scroll to the general area and look on my page to see the usages being highlighted in the text itself. So it's good for kind of knowing where things are used. It's also, I use it as a little way to compare strings. So oftentimes you may have, like, let's say this is a string, and then you have another one, this is a string, and you want to know if they're exactly the same. Well, just highlight it, and if the second one is also highlighted, then you know that they're the same. But let's say that here instead of string, I accidentally typed in sting, I guess. And when I highlight this up here, the second one is not highlighted, so I know they're not the same. I use it as a quick way to check if two or multiple things are the same, basically. Another thing that you'll often want to do is find stuff. So the keyboard shortcut for that is Control F, and then that opens up this little find widget up here. Go ahead and start typing what you want to find for. So let's say I want to find bind. You type it and it finds it. Now, similar to how when your cursor is over a word, results are highlighted. Well, when you search, the search results are highlighted, and they're highlighted in the scroll bar as well as on the page. So I can see all the usages of bind highlighted over here. I can see there's some usages here. I can see there's some usages here, some here, here, and some here. And I can also see them on the page. Now you can, a useful thing is to navigate through these find results. So it tells you that you found 10 of them and we are at the first one. If you press F3, it'll take you to the second one. Press F3 again, third one, and so on. So F3 to go to the next one, and Shift F3 to go to the previous one. That's also something I often do. It's very useful. Another useful thing is usually you want to restrict your find to just a certain region. Just highlight that region first, press Control F, and then click this little Find and Selection button in the Find widget. Click that, and now when you search, it only restricts it to the region that you have selected. As you can see, all of the find results down here, they're not highlighted because it's only searching what we have selected. Another thing that you'll often want to do is find and replace. So the shortcut for that is Control H. Press Control H and go ahead and search for what you want to find. I'll keep it as bind, and then press Tab, and now what you want to replace it with. Let's say capital bind. And so now click this little find, well, not that yet. So now click this button, which is the Replace All button, which will basically replace all these usages of your phrase that it found with whatever you wanted to replace it with. So click that, and as you can see, they've been changed here, they've been changed here, and so on. Now I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to press Control Z to undo. Similar to the find, the replacement can also be restricted to just a region. Select your region of interest, press Control H, and now the find and replace will only affect your region of interest. But again, you have to have the find and selection button enabled. So there you go. Now if I click replace all, it's only going to replace these two, which is in my region of interest. I'm going to undo that as well. That, by the way, this workflow of selecting a region of interest, pressing Control H, searching for a key and then a replacement, and enabling the find and selection, you'll do that quite often. That's very useful. Another common thing that you'll do is go to the definition of things. So let's say that I have a function here. We have a test function that takes 2 arguments, and it doesn't do anything. But let's say we use it over here. And you can go to the definition of this function by pressing F2 once your cursor is on it. Not F2, I'm sorry, F12. So there you go. Or you can just right click it and go to definition. Or with your cursor still over it, you can bring up all the commands by pressing Control Shift A and typing go to definition. All of them are equivalent. As I mentioned earlier, most of the things that you're doing in Visual Studio Code are commands, and there's various ways to execute those commands. The most obvious is to press Control Shift A and bring up your Show All Commands widget, type for a command, navigate with your arrow keys. So once you're over the command that you're interested in, press Enter, and it executes it. That's the most obvious way. But you can also execute them from the context menu, some of them. So here I can just right click and go to definition. Similarly, you'll often want to see all the symbols in the file and filter them, sort of, and also go to certain ones. So press Alt and backslash. Actually, this is not the default shortcut, so go to, oh yeah, we did set this shortcut. So press Alt, backslash, and you'll be presented with this widget up here. By default, it shows you all the symbols, so all the functions, all the classes, etc. in your current file. You can use the scroll wheel of your mouse to look through them. You can also filter them. So let's say I only want things that have the phrase widget, WI. Now it's showing me only the symbols with WI. So I want to search for, let's say, test function. There it is. I press Enter, and it takes me to that symbol. So again, that's Alt and backslash. And the command is called go to symbol in file. Another thing that you'll often do is want to navigate forward and backward between your cursor positions. So let's say I'm modifying this function over here. And then I go do a little thing over here. I just look at that for a little bit. And then I go over here. Now let's say I want to go back to my previous cursor position. I can just hit Alt and left arrow. Takes me back there. And if I want to go back again, hit Alt, left arrow again. And to go forward, hit Alt and right arrow. So Alt, right arrow is forward. Alt, left arrow is backward. That's navigating between cursor positions. Very useful and very commonly used. You'll also want to frequently rename symbols. So let's say that I'm not happy with this A symbol here. I can just put my cursor over it, and then I can hit F2 to rename it. It pops up that little thing, and I type in a new name for it and press Enter. Oh, that particular refactoring failed. Well, let's see why. Change it to AA. And then we will hit F2 to rename it, and let's rename it to new name, press Enter. Okay, I don't know why the other one failed, and I don't really have time to get into it, but that's how you rename things. Alternatively, you can right click and rename symbol. Same thing. To move a line up or down, which is something you'll do very, very often, just put the cursor anywhere on the line, and press Alt up to move it up and Alt down to move it down. So as you can see, I'm moving that line up and down. To copy a line down, it's something that you do very often. Just press Control D and it will copy the line that your cursor is on down. To cut a line, just press Shift and delete. That places it in your clipboard, so then when you press Control V anywhere, it pastes it. So Shift plus delete cuts the line. Another thing is if you have nothing selected on a line and you want to copy the whole line, you can just press Control C, copies the entire line, and then anywhere you can paste it. Now here's a really cool feature that you'll use often. Let's say that we have a bunch of variables here. So C is equal to 3, D is equal to 5, E is equal to 6. And let's say we wanted to change all these assignments. So if you leave your cursor there and then press Control, Alt, and then press the down arrow, you see your cursor gets longer in the downward direction. If you want it to get longer in the upward direction, just press the up arrow instead of the down. But I have multiple cursors now. And let's say I wanted to change everything by adding a 0. There we go. Alternatively, you can have more control by just holding the Alt key and then clicking anywhere you want to place a cursor. So I want to place a cursor there and maybe one randomly here. And then I want to press the space and type something. You see, it goes in everywhere that my cursor exists. So everything happens just as it normally would, except instead of having just one cursor position, you now have multiple. Again, to do that, hold Alt and then keep clicking wherever you want to place a cursor at. Here's another little quick tip to extend your selection. You can, let's say my cursor is over here, and if you hold Shift Alt and then you press the right arrow key, the selection will be extended. So watch what happens when I hit the right arrow key once. The A has been selected. If I hit it again, it selects everything that's inside the parentheses. If I hit it yet again, it selects everything, it selects the parentheses included. If I hit it again, it selects the line. If I hit it again, it selects the whole file. So you can see how the selection kept on getting bigger and bigger. Now, if instead of hitting the right arrow, I hit the left arrow, it shrinks it. So let's hit the left arrow once, shrinks back down to a line, hit it again, shrinks down to the parentheses, hit it again, shrinks to only inside the parentheses, and we're back down to one character. And now nothing. So to extend the selection, again, it's Shift Alt right arrow. To shrink the selection, it's Shift Alt left arrow. Cool little tip. Here's something that you will use a lot. You'll often want parameter hints. So when you're calling a function, let's say we're calling my test function, you see this little parameter hint pops up. It basically gives you the name of the parameters. And if the parameters have a docstring, that will be printed down here. So it's easy to call functions this way. Now, if you hit escape, that goes away. Or if you start typing, sometimes it goes away. If you want to bring it back up, just press Control Shift Space. Similar, but a little bit different. You often want to autocomplete. There's lots of things that pop up in the autocomplete. It's basically like if you are calling a method, on a object. So if you press the dot after an object and you want to get a list of all the methods in that object, you can press Control Space to open up the autocomplete. But also there's snippets and other things that pop up in the autocomplete. So for example, if I just press the autocomplete here, so Control Space, and then I start typing MA to filter it a little bit, you can see that there's this little main, and if I use the arrow keys to highlight it, it says it's a code snippet. I press Tab to insert it, and it inserted the main code snippet for Python. Again, to trigger the autocomplete, it's Control Space. Don't confuse that with triggering the parameter hint, which is Control Shift Space. And just so you guys know, I will put all of these notes written along with the keyboard shortcuts in a nice little file in the description of the video so that you can have a textual representation of this as well. So here's another quick little hint that's very useful. Oftentimes when I'm programming, I don't really worry about my document formatting. So I might, create a bunch of, let's say, spaces here, and then I might create a variable here, and then put a whole bunch of spaces again, create a variable here, and it just looks really messy. Everything doesn't really look good, you know, like that. You can execute the format document command. So open up your command palette, search for format document, execute it, and it spaces everything nicely. Alternatively, I'm going to press Ctrl-Z to undo that. You can just right click and format document right over here. They both do the same thing. So since I have the Python extension running, I can actually go ahead and debug files. I can run them and debug them, so I'll quickly show you how to do that. I'm actually going to create a little test Python file here by pressing Ctrl-N, and then I'm immediately going to press Ctrl-Shift-A to open up the command palette, and I'm going to type in change language mode. You see how it's already up there? That's because I use that command so much. So the command, like this little command widget, is actually pretty smart. But to demonstrate to you guys, I will still search for it. So I'm searching for the change language mode command. I execute it, and now it wants me to select what language, and I can even filter those. So I will type in Py and select Python. So I've changed the language of this file to Python. I'm going to go ahead and create a test function here, and it takes 2 parameters, and let's say C will be 10, D will be 11, E will be C plus D, and it will say was at the end. And now we'll go ahead and call that function with, we'll pass 1 and 2, and we'll put a breakpoint over here. So, well, first of all, let me show you how to just run the file. Make sure you save the file. So I'm going to just save it on my desktop as test.py. And then you can just right click and do run Python file in terminal. And there you go, it ran it, there's my output. You can exit your terminal. And now what if I want to debug it? We'll go to the side over here, and you see that little red dot that pops up. I can place a breakpoint. Let's put a breakpoint right there. Hit F5 to debug the file. This thing will pop up, and we want to select to debug the Python file. That launches the debugger. There we go. We are broken at this line. And you can navigate using I should say, using this little debug widget up here, or keyboard shortcut keys. I like using the keyboard shortcut keys. So F10 to step over. There we go. I stepped over that, and now D has a value of 11. And by the way, you can see all the variables over here. You can also add variables to your watch list by just right-clicking on them and clicking Add to Watch. That's very useful. And here's your call stack. You can navigate up and down the call stack by just clicking on the frame that you're interested in. So again, for stepping, it's F10 to step down, F11 to step into, Shift F11 to step out of. The same exact keyboard shortcuts for the full-fledged Visual Studio IDE. To continue, it's F5. There we go. Or if you don't want to memorize the keyboard shortcuts, you can just use that little debug widget that popped up. So that's it for this tutorial. The purpose of it was to get you up and running and be competent in Visual Studio Code as fast as possible. I highly recommend Visual Studio Code. It's very fast. The user interface is really nice. It can handle a lot of languages, and it provides a lot of services like code navigation and refactoring that other text editors don't offer, but yet it's still much faster and lightweight than full-fledged IDEs. So I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend that you just, you don't have to spend a ton of time learning the tool. What you've learned in this tutorial is probably what you'll use 99.9% of the time that you're using this tool anyways. So you're good to go. Now again, I will post all of the keyboard shortcuts and notes for this tutorial in the description of the video. So if you're a textual person or you want a reference, just look at the description. Thank you for watching, and as usual, I hope to see you in another one of my tutorials. Bye-bye.